The Egyptian room of the Royal Arch Temple here at Petersham, which is where we're at this evening, is unique for its superb decorative frieze, which faithfully reproduces illustrations from the text of the Papyrus of Ani, an Egyptian funerary text dating from about 1450 BCE. The decorations are finely sculpted in low relief plaster and picked out in rich, authentic colours, as you can see looking around you, with lotus-headed columns supported, while lotus-headed columns support decorative bands of stylised Egyptian motifs and ornaments. The Egyptian room decorative theme has some precedent in masonry, Masonic memorial chambers, but the scale and level of elaboration is unique in Australia. The survival of such rich and extensive decoration is rare, not only in Masonic temples, but in large-scale interiors generally. Erected in College Street Masonic Centre in 1927, it was re-erected here in Petersham in 1977. The Papyrus of Ani, from which the vignettes around the room have been accurately reproduced, was discovered in Luxor in 1888 by Egyptians and acquired, shall we say, by the British Museum about 1935. It had been written about 1450 BCE for Ani, the veritable royal scribe and accountant of the offerings of all of the gods, governor of the granary of the lords of Abydos, scribe of the offering of the lords of Thebes. His wife Tutu, a member of the Royal College of Singers in the temple of Amun-Ra at Thebes, had died some years before him. That section of the frieze in the east, over the throne of the Master's Lodge, shows the judgment in which the dead man's soul, represented by his heart, was placed on a balance and weighed against truth and righteousness, represented by a feather. The balance is held by the jackal-headed god Anubis. If Ani's heart is heavier than the feather, he is condemned. However, if he is found righteous, his heart is found righteous, coming from the balance, and he is taken before Osiris in the Hall of Truth. The decoration throughout the rest of the room is also based on Egyptian sources. For example, over the junior warden's chair, in the centre of the right-hand wall, is a relief reproducing a stele or tomb tablet of the 20th dynasty, about 1200 BC, which shows a worshipper making an offering to Osiris, the god of the underworld. Around the room stand pillars in classical Egyptian design. Gold leaf features prominently in the decorations. Ani was a tax collector at Thebes, also known as Luxor. His wife was Tutu, who predeceased him. In the next frieze, Ani implores the gods to allow him to join her again in the afterlife. Transition was from hieroglyphs to cotton text to papyrus writings and paintings. This frieze, originally papyrus, some 22 metres long, under or next to a coffin. I think we're up there. Sir Wallace Budge, the UK Egyptologist and British Museum curator, was offered it, authenticated by 2 wax-edged seals. The hieroglyph of the lotus leaf stands for beauty, the pomegranate stands for plenty, and the papyrus plant in bloom used for writing, etc., even to this day. Upon death, the Egyptians believed that they would meet Anubis, a jackal-headed man and keeper of the afterlife, who was in charge of the ceremony to the afterlife. If you wanted everlasting life, you must triumph with right over wrong in this life. After Ani dies, up in the corner of the frieze, you will see a chest, and in that are the 4 Kenobi jars of Ani under the jackal's protection. The funeral ceremony shown here, likely to be friends and family, with a sarcophagus on the sled, with 2 hieroglyphs indicating the hope of Ani's reunion with his wife, Tutu. The jars on the sled contain Ani's viscera, are pulled by 2 beasts who are killed at Ani's wake. The bare-breasted women are professional mourners. The more noise at the funeral, the better. The next frieze. This awakens Osiris. The ritual and documentation for the ceremony is shown with Osiris. Baskets of food are obvious. The funny-looking instruments in their hands allow Ani to breathe, speak, and see again in the afterlife. The sarcophagus is now upright, indicating new life. Ani's sarcophagus is now in an upright position. Anubis, the jackal-headed man, is holding on to him. Moving on, we now see the Egyptian pyramids and a little door through which all must go through to be accepted. Next, the vignette of compassion, consultation, and hope. Ani is now seen playing a board game, fundamentally thought to be harmony, but details are unknown. Looking behind Ani now, we see Tutu again. Ani is now seen to be rising up in bird form, ready to go to the next world. We then see 2 lions, one looking each way, and between them Amun-Ra, the sun god. The lions' respective views are of yesterday and tomorrow. The big long-legged bird is called the Bennu bird. Its meaning represents the phoenix rising. The secretary bird, plentiful in Egypt, always looking and listening to its surroundings. Symbolically, the Bennu bird has been keeping watch on Ani and his works in life. Turning now from the north to the west wall, Ani in his sarcophagus, the Kenobi jars underneath, we now see the hawk bird. The hieroglyph above says, "I am the sister or wife of Isis." On the other side is Osiris Unefer. The hieroglyph above her says, "I am the sister of Osiris." They are discussing Ani's future. Next we see Ani going into eternity. The symbol is the green man. In the pool is Osiris' son, Horus. He is the magistrate to judge the future path of Ani. Also is the mummification vignette of mankind. On one side he has Nathan, and on the other side nitrate. Next we see the seal of the great God and that small door through which all must pass for judgment and possible acceptance to the afterlife. We see the eye of Horus, the stamp of which supports the transition of anyone to the afterlife. The next is the cow with a royal collar and crown of Amun-Ra between his horns. The cow's name is Hathor. She's the goddess of love, of the sky, fertility, and importantly, nature. Milk being that nurture from the cow. The next frieze, she has a temple attended by thousands of women who pay homage to Hathor for all the above reasons and for childbirth. Next we see Annie getting closer and rising into the other world. Horus is there too, and in his hands we see those items called the Ankh, the jewel and insignia for eternal life, presented only by the great god Osiris. Annie considers himself worthy of that and rises from the grave between two great pillars, having told the truth, then triumphing over evil by cutting the head off the snake. And here are a group of judges under Horus, watching Annie's actions throughout life. Next we see Tutu with the cestrum in her hand. She's a priestess with others praying to the Egyptian dung beetle, the symbol of renewed life. With the approval of those above, there is now no reason to prohibit the progress of Annie. The young lion, now shown, depicts humanity. Nearby is shown greenery and a cobra wound around the greenery. Behind that is a barrier of fire. Like a bushfire, it symbolises Annie's going into the new world under the sponsorship of Horus, who has the power of life and death. Having come through, he sees Tutu and her sister at a distance. He comes before a court, being warned by these judges to be very careful, as his future is in the balance. The cestrum, which is a musical instrument, like a tambourine, accompanies the women in their chanting as Annie proceeds. Having considered his doubts and failings, Anubis appears with an ant in one hand and a wasp, which is the weapon of authority, in the other. He awards Annie with a collar to allow him to appear in front of these minor judges. Next, he asks for water as an essential to life. He does not want to be thirsty again. He does not want to be hungry either, so a sycamore tree drops nuts for the afterlife. Next, Anubis takes hold of Annie as he waits for judgment and is uncertain. Next, Annie tells Anubis to look behind him, where the Bennu bird is standing, symbolising right. Annie passes through the door and is seen in a hawk form rising from the sarcophagus. The next picture is very rare. It shows a ram with the crown of Egypt on its head, with Annie paying homage or adoration to it. The ram is called Remdu, the god of cataract, where two Nile rivers come together and spill over to flood the Nile Valley. The Nile floods mean another new crop and new life with it. Annie is wise in putting Remdu in such great respect because of that god's high importance. The next vignette depicts Isis on the side of Nephis, his sister. On the other, they are discussing Annie knocking on the door, seeking sanction. They cannot agree and send Annie to the court of the great god. Annie, his wife Tutu following, appears before the court of 12 judges, similar to our High Court and panel of jurors. Each has a wasp, or a symbol of authority, in his hand. The next vignette of negative confession, which basically means I have not cheated, have not stolen, etc. And there are 52 of these statements made by Annie. The court is undecided, so they send him to the great scales of justice. These are now outside many courts, as you might have seen depicted. And the great the great rod, rather, of Osiris. Annie's heart is placed on the scales against the feather of truth. If the heart is too heavy, it will be eaten by a crocodile, and Annie damned. The ibis is recording the result of the scale's measure of Annie's heart. Horus takes Annie's hand, indicating he has passed the test. He leads Annie along. We then see the corner vignette, Osiris, the great god, sitting on the throne, attended by his wife Isis and sister Nephthys in the open court of everlasting life. So Annie is received into that state, reunited with his beloved wife Tutu. Additional hieroglyphs on the frieze deserve some explanation. Isis with the glyph, then An and Ra, and then Osiris is sitting on his throne with the Ankh in one hand and the crook in the other. The green line showed the Egyptians knew that the horizon fell away in the distance and that the world was round. Isn't that interesting? The wings of Horus represent authority. The blue and white checker band, now worn by police, reflects that authority today. And the last is the scales of justice. Uraeus, the upright cobra, and the other symbols in this frieze remind us of the good we should strive for.